they don't want to be involved. Now, there are other people that do want to be involved and don't really know and don't really understand how they can be involved. So one of the big problems is the communications isn't out there. It's not been promoted enough. We get some emails that say finance committee needs somebody, landscape committee needs somebody. So it's not promoted enough. And like it was said before, sometimes you just have to ask, you know, how did you get onto this committee? Well, somebody happened to actually ask and say, hey, you'd be good on this committee. I've asked a number of people to be on the finance committee that would be great members, and they said, I don't want to. They said, I don't want to put up with it. I'm not interested. I did my stuff. I don't want to do it. Another thing that we could do is, Siena used to have a Siena directory or phone book. And maybe if we brought that back out again, we could see what the expertise were of the different people. And when we had a particular problem, we could say, hey, we can call Joe over here. He knows how to fix that light bulb. So there are things we can do, but promoting it, improving communications are big things. I also think we need more people on each of the committees, just as a general theme. There should be more people on the committees.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions?
Yeah, I have.
Gentlemen, it's fair to say, I think, that the boards over the past 8 or 9 years and the management company have been notoriously ineffective in dealing with the golf course and the problems that it presents for us. Now that it appears that we are reaching a crisis point, would you be willing to support the creation of a standing committee of residents who have professional and business backgrounds to serve as our representatives in dealing with the golf course in the hopes that we could reach a comprehensive and equally beneficial relationship with them?
We'll start with Jay.
I see no reason why we couldn't create an ad hoc committee on the golf course that would consist of golfers and non-golfers to try and negotiate with the managers of the golf course about our mutual problems. I'm not extremely hopeful that they will do any better than what the board has done the past 7 or 8 years. Literally, all these different boards trying to deal with the golf course. Because basically, their interests are not necessarily our interest. You know, it's going to be very difficult to come to a mutual agreement with the golf course that is satisfactory to both sides. Because what we want to do more than anything else is keep the golf course open. But the golf course does not necessarily want to do that. They may simply be happy to close it or sell it to developers or whatever and make the most possible money out of it. Now, I don't know how those things can really be reconciled, but one thing the board is doing, well, it's going to be recommended. I don't know if the board will pass it, but we're budgeting. We're going to recommend for the upcoming budget an additional $50,000 in legal fees specifically to deal with the upcoming legal problems that we anticipate with the golf course, because it's going to get messy. And I don't know how messy. I don't see how a committee could do any harm, and they might do some good. So I'd be in favor of it.
Bob?
Harvey, I'm sitting here thinking about this ad hoc committee. One of the reasons that I ran for the board is that I know Mike Singer for the last 2 years has dealt with the golf course as the liaison between our community and the golf course. I also know that Mike's wife said, if you run again, I'll kill you, or words to that effect. I'm going to volunteer to take Mike's position should I get elected to the board. Because number one, I'm a golfer. Number two, I'm a member of the Siena community. And number three, I don't want to see that turned into something different than what I bought when I moved in here. So I also think it would be a good idea for me to go to some other people in our community and perhaps even to invite somebody from the golf course to be on that committee so that we can begin to talk together to make sense out of this quandary. I'm not ready to throw my hands up in the air and say it can't be solved. I'm ready and I'm volunteering to work on that committee, whether it be as a board member or as a citizen. So I think it's time that we started talking like there is common ground, and maybe find if we can build that bridge.
Steve?
I'm definitely in favor of a committee, ad hoc committee, subcommittee, to find out the problem. I have friends that live in Queensridge and they're going through it now. They're losing, and each household had to put up a few $1,000s for a battery of lawyers. And basically, the wealthier people in Queensridge said, just, we'll pay the extra money. But they're going to be building luxury condos on one of their golf courses. I would hate to see that happen here. But a committee, we have enough lawyers that live here, Harvey being one of them. And we have enough people that play golf and they're really interested in the game. So I think a committee would be great. The worst you could do is lose. But if you're smart enough and you negotiate well enough, you shouldn't lose. Thank you.
Jerry?
Well, yeah, I think we should absolutely have a committee to take a look at it, but I think more important than that, we don't really know what's going on with the golf course. We have no idea what the deed restrictions are or aren't. We have no idea of any agreements. We don't know, really, it's all hearsay about, well, this or that. We need to get a group together to sit down and get the deed and find out when Sun Colony sold the golf course to Mr. Lee, what's in that deed? What are the deed restrictions? What can he do? What can't he do? There's rumors that, well, if the golf course wants to change it, someone gets the property back. There's all these stories. There's stories that it's a floodplain. There's stories that it's not a floodplain. We don't know. We don't have a clue what we're even dealing with, and we already have the world on fire. So the first step, let's find out what's really going on. But we do need a committee to look at that, because obviously whatever we've been doing in the past, they don't even at this point know the whole story. Or if they do know it, they haven't told anybody.
Harvey?
Mr. Brown recognized this problem a long time ago and has been asking just the same things that he asked today. First of all, I have no objection to a committee. I started the dialogue with our attorney, and it's very important in a situation like this to have an attorney, to ask him if he could sue the golf course, which he recommended against. I asked him about, can we spend our money on another property? And his answer was no, except for a few piddling dollars like he mentioned. Last year, and it's denied by everybody that I talked to, Mr. Shaffritz proposed that we increase our dues by $3 to help pay for our lawyer and put that money in the reserves. That amounts to $72,036. This year in our budget, they've only put $10,300 towards the legal account. What happened to the other $61,736? So before we go raising assessments, let's find out, as Jerry has said, what are we facing? And of course, we do have to have people that live on the golf course. Maybe there's an insurance case. Maybe they'd be willing to put up money, and maybe they'd say, no, my dues is enough. And they certainly are the most affected people and should be on that committee. We have Mr. Brown is a lawyer. He should be on it. And they should have access to our attorney, because as our attorney said to us, he lives in the HOA legal world. And we have to know what course to take based on law, not so much on hearsay. So I agree that 100% that we should have people involved in some sort of an ad hoc committee, and whatever they discover should be shared with everybody. It shouldn't be a veiled secret.
Time is up. Next question?
Well, Bill Glass again. The golf course is a big issue. And over coffee. I've heard discussions about that. Is there some way that Sienna could help increase the flow of business through that golf course by allowing signage, public golf course, somewhere on our perimeter? Would a lot more business on that golf course help our situation?
We'll start with Bob.
You know, I just found out the other day that the biggest source of income for the Sienna Golf Course is the Sienna Bistro, which I thought was really interesting. As a matter of fact, that's what's keeping body and soul together, if you will, over there, from the information that was passed on to me. They want to put a sign out front. They want to pay for it. I think everybody should know that it's a public golf course. I think that we should help them over the next few years, because I understand there's an agreement with the new latitudes to have their members of their HOA be able to use the facility here. So there's a chance that we could help this man whose philosophy currently, from my understanding, is I want to be the last man standing, because golf courses are closing everywhere. If he keeps this one open and there's fewer places to go, that might increase his business. I think we also have to listen to him though a little bit. This community was supposed to have 2,300 housing units in it. They anticipated 2,300, which would increase the numbers of people playing golf. We only have 2,000. So do we need to work together with him? The answer is yes. Should we help him to market? I think reasonably. And if everybody in here would go play golf once a week, it's problem solved. Thank you.
Steve's next.
I don't know if a sign would be the answer. I am not a golfer, but I would do anything to help Sienna because I live here. I think a study needs to be done, and not a 5-year study, something like a 30 days to get all the information out. Golf is a dying game, and that's happening around the United States. Our neighbors across the street, well, they're going to have a high-end golf course, but that's for them. A lot of golf courses in Las Vegas are being sold. Now, the fact that we have 2,001 homes, so that means theoretically, if we have the flat plains that sold, then another, 199 or 299 homes could be built, because it was originally supposed to be 2,300. There's a lot of issues here. I don't make decisions without facts and information. That's how I am. So I would have to look into it with the committee or just listen to the committee and find out what information they find. Thank you.
Jerry?
Well, again, we don't really have any information. We don't really know what's going on. It's not up to Sienna to run the golf course. So now, should we help them? Should we work with them? Yeah. In the past, we've tried to do different food events over there, and they've kind of worked, they kind of haven't worked. The people get used to going over there, and then, well, no, they can't go today because it's closed because we're doing a special event. So it's kind of a mess. We don't really know. Now, from a marketing standpoint, they definitely should have some kind of signage in order to be able to be seen from the highway. And a small monument sign in our entryway out there wouldn't to me, wouldn't be a problem and would be beneficial, but it would have to be appropriately designed. And I'm not talking about a tall structure, which probably couldn't get an ordinance to put in this residential neighborhood anyhow. But a nice little monument sign of some sort, backlit sign that looks very nice, would help them probably and would not deter, from our community in here. But until we know, again, what's going on, I was told that Sienna is kind of like the stepchild to Red Rock, and that Sienna is used for the overflow and for just whatever they can't do, and if anything breaks at Red Rock, they come down here and take it from here and take it up there. So there's so much stuff, again, we don't know. We don't want them to go out of business. But again, it's not our responsibility to keep them in business because we don't control how they operate their business. So.
Harvey?
Well, if you looked at the manager's report last month, from March through August, some 400 to 500 people that are Sienna residents play on the golf course. If you look at the food and beverage discount residents receive, it runs anywhere between $1,900 and $2,500. If this is what's keeping the golf course afloat, they're in terrible, terrible shape. I would ask Mr. Lee to open his books to us. Would he open his books to us? I doubt it. And like I said, we must remember what the lawyer told us. We cannot spend Sienna money on another property. And again, it's not a quick and easy thing. Like I said, Mr. Brown's been asking this question for the longest time. Nobody's tackled it. It has to be tackled. We could wind up maybe with buildings the size of Queensbridge on the property, but we don't know. No one seems to know what is the floodplain, where is the floodplain. No one seems to know what is the flatland, where is the flatland. It's all a secret. And it can't operate that way. We can't operate that. We're a $10 million business, folks. Whether we like it or not, we are a business, and our board has to start operating like we're a business. Be tough on our vendors, CCMC, Securitas, Jaramillo. If we don't get tough on these things, we're going to have to dip into our pockets, and we're going to be asking for a lot of money from everybody, and maybe everybody is a trust fund baby, I don't know. But we could outprice ourselves in terms of this HOA.
Thank you. Jay?
The question was, what can Sienna do to help the golf course? Well, quite frankly, aside from raising dues on everyone to help finance them, we can't do very much legally. That is, the golf course approached us about putting up a sign. The board basically approved that, and we're waiting to see what they propose to put up. The manager of the golf course, which also manages the bistro, which is their only way of having the small profit that they do now, has asked us for the use of this ballroom without charging them. So they could have events here, weddings and whatever we have in this ballroom, and they would save a couple $1,000 each time they would use it for their various parties. Well, we're thinking about that, but even if we are able to give that to them, it wouldn't be very much money. Now, in terms of big money, they literally came to us and offered to sell us the lakes for $3 million. Well, that's a non-starter. We don't have $3 million to buy the lakes. We don't even have $300,000 to buy the lakes. And the real question is, can we legally do it? Now, last year, not this budget, but the previous year's budget, I recommended that we allocate, I think, $10,000 or $20,000 specifically for legal fees so that our lawyer can do the research into the situation with the golf course, anticipating these kinds of problems would come up. The board didn't approve it. So we don't have the money in our legal budget account for that. We are recommending, I think we're going to recommend it, hasn't been voted on yet, that we allocate $25,000 for legal, specifically for legal fees for the golf course.
Time is up.
We'll see what happens.
Are there any other questions?
No, let me, okay. Go ahead. Okay. Yeah, with all due respect, and I don't just want to get away from the golf course because it is a massive problem.
and I see there's a lot of misinformation. I've lived here for 16 years, have played golf there for 16 years, I've been in the men's club, et cetera, have negotiated with them, being on the board and being on the finance committee, et cetera. There's a lot of things, it's much more complex even than what you're regarding there, and that is true, and that's a major problem. But what I wanted to get to was, this question is directed to Steve. You said, I will try to solve the problems in Siena, on your sheet, try to solve the problems in Siena, including productivity, using the out-of-box approach. I guess the implication is that maybe we're not getting a good bang for the buck with either CCMC or our staff here, and I wonder if you could elaborate on that, exactly what that might entail. And perhaps the rest of you may have some ideas and so forth, and speak frankly about productivity, because this is our day-to-day cost, and this is really what
Time is up.
This is what produces our revenue and our daily fee, our
Steve?
monthly fee.
Sure. Well, what I mean by that, when I solve problems and still do it, I just don't look exactly at all the facts. I want to know what's going in and what's coming out. When I walk around Siena, when I see people standing around a desk, sometimes I see people working, sometimes I don't see people working. I don't know what's going on in the offices. That's not my house. I can't just go there and ask questions like that. When I see people, and I consider Jeremy part of Siena, 6, 7 guys on the side doing basically nothing. It reminds me of the days in New York when I seen sanitation, and you have 4 guys and they're talking and there's nothing going on. That's what I mean about productivity. I mean, whatever we could squeeze by having people working a little harder or having management, I don't necessarily mean Michael DeVoe, going around, walking the property, seeing what's doing. I was a hands-on educator, and I always found people goofing off, but when they knew I was coming, everybody was working. So that's the way I ran my business, which was education. As a former fireman, we just went to fires and put them out in the emergencies. But that's what I mean, hands-on. I want to know what's going on, and productivity. I hope I answered your question.
Jerry?
Well, I'm not sure of the exact question, but basically, my response would be, I want to make sure we get our money's worth. I don't want to pay for something that we're not getting. And when I was in my mid-late 20s, I was a manager of a large retail pharmacy in Pasadena. I could tell you where every item in that store was, what shelf it was on, 3 shelves from the bottom, 2 inches from the left over there, and this was a 10,000 square foot store in there. I was also very aware of what, because I had 30-some people working for me, I was also very aware of what every one of those people were doing, even though they didn't know I had any idea what they were doing. I knew when they were screwing off, I knew when they were doing what they were supposed to be doing. And I think I bring that approach to management to the Siena board if I'm elected in there, in that I understand hands-on, but I understand being focused and being aware of what's going on. In the past, I'm not sure that we had a lot of awareness of who's where. I just have a way of noticing who comes in at 5 after 8, who comes in at 35 after 8. And again, it just goes back to, are we getting our money's worth? Are we getting our money's worth from each one of our vendors? I don't think we have a bad relationship with our vendors. I think, in fact, we have a pretty good relationship with our vendors, and I think basically they're doing a good job. But like any good job, they have employees, and maybe they don't know what their employees are doing. So I hope that kind of answers your question.
Harvey?
First, let's go to the guidance that was established in 2015 and signed by Mr. Cutler. Mr. Shaffritz has alluded to it. They've given over day-to-day management to CCMC. Sometimes they just act like they want to do the big things, okay? Mr. Shaffritz says he's going to put $25,000 in a legal fund. according to the third revision of the budget that I was given. Legal is legal was $30,000 last year. They're adding $10,300 to make it $40,300. So I just want to be clear on that. With respect to, for example, managing Jaramillo, someone came last night to tell how they've asked and told a number of times about dying plants. Let me tell you what we pay Jaramillo. We pay them, I just counted, we pay $500 to $3,000 a year, which is $41,000 a month. We pay them $31,000 a year for landscape repairs, and we pay them $23,000 for plant maintenance. We just did a contract with Jaramillo. When I go down to Star Nurseries, when I go down to 30 seconds, okay, I can do it, I think. When I go down to Star Nurseries and I buy something on sale, I can get it from anywhere from $3 to $7. The contract with Jaramillo calls for $29 to plant a bush. That's absolutely outrageous. Where was the board on that? They're relying on the landscape committee for reference and the finance committee. That's craziness. He's a wholesaler.
Time is up.
He buys wholesale.
Jay?
I think, generally speaking, we have an excellent group of employees. This place is very well run. Look at the fitness center. Look at this, the social center. You know, we don't have any major problems with employees, and when we do, occasionally, Michael Laveau, our manager, fires them. And he has fired a few people over the last couple of years. But generally, the board only gets involved with the hiring and the functioning and the productivity of the manager and the assistant manager. And then the new contract provides that we will also be consulted with the division heads. But below that, this is entirely the function of the general manager and our general manager's statement in the statement that we wrote about the function of the manager says that is his responsibility and that the board will not get involved in the nitty-gritty of it. Because if we do, that then undercuts the role of the manager, and we don't want to do that. We want to run this place as policymakers, and the prime implementer, the guy in charge of implementation and of most of the employees is the general manager. That's how it works now. That's how it should work well into the future. Thank you.
Bob?
It's said that you're not an idiot until you open your mouth. Are we getting what we're paying for? I look around and I'm pretty happy with what we're getting. But to be quite honest, again, one of the reasons that I'm sitting in this chair today is because I want to find out if we're getting what we're paying. I want to be informed, and I want to make a decision based on your input and the committee's input as to how we can best get our bang for our buck. I think the place is nice. Are there things that could be improved? Of course. As I said last night, I hate chickweed, but it's everywhere. It grows nicely, but it's not in the right places. So, I'm just going to wait until I have more information if you decide to put me on the board so that I can tell you in an open meeting whether we're getting our bang for our buck.
Next question.
You gentlemen are all running for the board, which is the governance body of this community. I'd like a show of hands as to whether or not you have read the governance policy. You ought to. Jay kind of started getting into this. if you've read it, I'd like to know whether in principle you agree with it, and if there are any specifics in there that you disagree with. Sitting here in the audience, listening to various ones of you talk about how you'd operate as a board member, certainly doesn't strike me that it's very consistent with that governance policy. So, if you've read it, do you agree with it in principle? And if you don't, where specifically do you not?
We'll start this question with Jerry.
Yeah, not only have I read it, Bob, but I actually have a copy of it with me. And in general, I do agree with it. There isn't anything in there that I find to be a blatant, problem in there. I hope I didn't say something that went against it in something that I said. But yeah, no, I think this is good. And it shows just the very back page shows how the diagram of the workflow system in here, and how the homeowners and the board of directors and the policy, and I think that's the way it should run. I think it's a good document.
Harvey?
Just to prove it to you, Mr. Normandin, I have it also. Yes, it's a good outline. But when you're sitting on a board, and I've sat on boards, I sit on a board here in the Valley called the Export International Committee. You just can't sit back and go by what's written. You have to get up off your seat and go out and look at things. You have to demand from whoever's the manager, the boss, the chief, whoever's in charge. As I said last night, I worked for the federal government. I had a picture behind my desk of a foot soldier, because the foot soldier is the guy that gets it done, not the generals. The good generals, like someone like Patton, was right there with his troops. You have to go out and look at these things when people come to a board meeting and they say they have an issue. And that's my opinion, that you just can't sit back and stare at people like they came from Mars, because it's not written in the Bible of Siena.
Jay?
Not only have I read it, I was one of the major writers of it. We started in the beginning. I wanted this biblical connotation. I was considering one in the course of human events, but I thought that was too political. So basically, I was appalled when I first got on the board last year and a half ago, that we didn't have such a document which laid out the rules, the roles and responsibilities of each of the major policy actors in the community. We needed a formal statement of what the board should be doing, because prior to that time, the board was getting involved with too much of the nitty-gritty of the detail that the board shouldn't be involved with. So we laid out the policy-making role of the board, and then we laid out the unique policy-making position of the president of the board, who basically is simply first among equals and speaks for the board as a group, but doesn't speak for himself. He just speaks, he represents what the board has to say, basically to the general manager. And then we lay out the role of the general manager. And then